With me now is a special guest, David Gerson. He's authored a book, How Crony Capitalism Crushed the Middle Class and Killed the Economy. He's also a candidate for Congress, a Minnesota Republican Tea Party candidate. Is that right, David?
That's correct.
Hey, well, how's the campaign going?
Great. We got a lot of energized folks here in Minnesota trying to spread the word and make some change.
Good for you. For a guy who has done what you're doing, I can only appreciate the long hours and probably the bad reviews in some of the liberal papers, right?
Absolutely. And actually, some of the Republican leadership is upset with us as well. We're taking on an incumbent rubber stamp who has been in office for 10 years and has voted in line with Boehner and has been part of the problem within the system in supporting the special interest groups versus upholding the Republican platform.
You know, I'd love to get you back just on that topic because we saw the turnover this last election cycle, at least in 10 of the Congress. And do you think you'll see more of that this go around?
Absolutely. You know, the approval rating is the lowest in history, so expect to see some change. And our campaign is just one more shot across the bow to incumbents that the grassroots movement is getting activated, and we're looking to hold people accountable for their discretions.
Okay. All right, tell me about your book about how crony capitalism, I should say, has crushed the middle class and how Obama wants to tax the rich. And we saw just this last week what he did with the Bush tax cuts. What's your interpretation?
Well, most of these issues are really sound bites that create linear thinking that is really a distraction from the real issues. And these types of manipulations is really what's keeping the public from being able to make informed decisions. And what my book tries to do is demystify and debunk these myths that are used to distort to the political interests of the establishment and leadership. And what my book talks about is the fact that where we are today, the bottom 80% of Americans only own 7% of the financial wealth and take in 38% of the income. All of the wealth and income over the last 20 years has accrued to the top few percent. And what my book does is analyzes in detail with supporting data the fact that as government has grown, so has crony capitalism and the influence of special interest groups. And the reason why Obama and Romney are likely to raise up to $1 billion each in their campaign is these lobbyists and special interest groups are lining up to maintain their benefits that come from the distortions that are put in legislation to support them. And what my book does is exposes the actual economics of that situation and explains how, as government's gotten bigger, it's created more distortions that have benefited the wealthy, and the Federal Reserve has been complicit through monetary policy and allowed government to be fiscally irresponsible. But what it explains in greater detail and demystifies is the fact that we now have two private sectors in America. We have the wealthy minority and the non-wealthy majority. And as the wealthy minority have gotten more and more of the wealth and income, they're actually saving more. They can't spend all the money that they're making. And this is the actual root cause problem as to why we don't have enough aggregate demand. And as the wealth has been going to the relative few, the majority, non-wealthy, have been taking on debt to try to maintain their standard of living as their real income has decreased. Mm. And we've gotten to a point where the Fed is no longer able to stimulate demand by pulling in demand from the future because we've lowered interest rates all the way down to zero. They're actually buying longer-term debt to try to lower interest rates for longer-term interest rates. And now we can no longer stimulate demand through the majority who have encumbered balance sheets, and it's actually the savings of the wealthy which is actually causing our aggregate demand problem. And the wealthy include Americans. It includes foreigners. If you look at our trade deficit, what that really is are wealthy foreigners that are willing to save in U.S. dollars, and it includes corporations.
Wow, this is a lot. So what few moments we have here, David, how does this affect the small business who is still the #1 employer?
Well, obviously, the small businesses are struggling. They don't have the types of access to government to be able to have the distortive power of the legislation for special interest groups be lobbied in their favor. So, really, the the small businesses are part of the dwindling middle class, and they're struggling under the weight of the regulations that are in place today. And really, there's no silver bullets. All we really can do is work to reduce the size of government, eliminate the distortions of the legislation, and remove the inefficiencies of the government itself. It's really that simple. But the reality is that our leadership in both parties are really under the control of the special interest groups and crony capitalism. And we've got to get some people into Congress, into Washington, D.C., that will represent the people and remove all of these distortions to allow the real economy to grow.
Let me jump outside of your book just for a moment. If you win your election and you go to Congress, is there a move among the Tea Party people who have won positions in Congress to replace John Boehner?
Well, that may be a ways off. We would still be in the very relative minority. My focus when I go to Congress is to use that position and influence to be able to grow the grassroots movement to a point where we can take all the Republican seats, or take on all the seats in Minnesota, to where we actually have more of a voice, solidarity, and greater numbers in Congress. The point to me is to get the message out to people that if they get involved, they can make a difference. I think that enlightenment to America now means that they understand that the system is broken, special interests and big money own government, and there's nothing you can do about it. And what we want to do is wake people up to the fact, or re-energize people to believe that they can make a difference. They can get involved. They can recruit some local leaders in the private sector that are not career politicians to run, support them, go out and vote, use their power to vote, and be able to actually change the country without being corrupted when they go to D.C.
All right, back to some of these economic issues. Given the president's change in the Bush tax cuts, it obviously is going to be a fairly significant tax increase on the rich. What will that do, in your opinion?
Well, I would prefer to have seen a tax revenue neutral bill. I hate to see more money go into the government. I want to see the smallest government and the smallest amount of taxes possible. And I'd rather have seen the rich, if the taxes were increasing on the wealthy, that they were decreased on the middle class. However, I believe it actually will not have much effect on the economy, because, as I said, the rich are saving. Their savings is what is actually causing the aggregate demand issue. But just sending it to Washington isn't going to increase the economy either.
Can we recover from this deficit and debt?
I believe that there isn't this impending financial cliff in the near future. We're the cleanest dirty shirt. We're the biggest, most resilient, most innovative economy in the world. And the reality is every other major economy is in worse shape than us. Japan, the UK, Europe, China. So we have more time than we think, but I hate to get that message out there, because we want people to start to take action, because the longer we wait, the more painful it's going to be. We can recover. The demographics are not that bad as far as what's going to be happening in the next 10 years. But again, what it's going to take, there's no silver bullets. What it's really going to take is making smaller government, removing those inefficiencies, and removing those market distortions.
Can we survive the cutback of some of these entitlements?
I think we just need to accept the fact that we've made promises that we can't keep. And unfortunately, that's just the reality. We just can't afford to have 50% of our GDP go to pay for entitlements. The economy will not work. So it's very unfortunate, but we're going to have to do something that's the fairest and most equitable way to deal with it.
What are Minnesotans telling you to do if you get elected? What do they want you to do?
Well, they want me to go change D.C., and I realize that as a lone voice, I'm going to have little impact. But what I can do is I can debunk issues. I can speak the truth. I can. What they really want me to do is set an example that you can go to D.C. and not lose your integrity. You can maintain your consistency. You can maintain your principles, and you can energize a base to get out there and get involved and believe that you can make change.
What will you tell a lobbyist that comes to your congressional door and want to give some substantial money to your campaign reelection fund?
The incumbent John Klein receives money from Goldman Sachs, and I just can't believe that any politician would take money from Goldman Sachs. So, I'm not worried about lobbyists. I'm not worried about money. I'm worried about getting the grassroots out there and working to educate people on the economic issues and trying to get them to participate in the process. Then I don't need any money. And the reality is, what I want to see is I want to see this money go away from government. The reason why the money's there is because of the benefits that come from the distortions that get put in the legislation. So if we can end those distortions, the money will stop knocking on the door. That's really what I want to get to.
There was a bill, not a bill, excuse me, there was a movement, I guess, to say that campaign funds could only be raised within the district that you represent. What do you think about that idea?
I believe in freedom. Even though I understand the distortive powers of money, I think people should be able to do whatever they want with their money. And so I really don't believe in campaign limits or anything like that.
Okay, it didn't go anywhere. I'm just curious, maybe kind of where you thought on that. Well, listen, where can people get a copy of your book, David?
Well, they can check me out and find out information about my book on my website, which is Gerson2012.com. That's Gerson 2012.com.
Okay, and there's a picture of that on the screen there. We had a picture on the TV screen, how crony capitalism crushed the middle class and killed the economy. Check his campaign out as well. Maybe you want to help him. David, thank you. Best of luck. So where are you in the campaign now? I mean, are you running, you're through your primary, aren't you?
We have our primary on August 14th, so that's the big race for me. We've got 4 weeks to go.
4 weeks to go. How do the polls show for you?
Actually, we haven't had an official poll yet, but we've got some momentum, and we've got a good shot at this.
Good. All right. Best of luck to you. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you.